in Excel. Okay. So the first thing we need to know is, see, a macro is nothing but it is a code written for when like actually automating tasks. Okay. So if I have a repetitive task, I can do what? I can write a code, or I can actually record a macro also, which is very much useful feature for us if we don't know coding. And what we can do here is we can always automate the repetitive task. Okay. So, for example, I'll just show you one example here. First thing we'll just see where the macros are located. Okay. So the first thing we'll see here is in the developer tab. See, there is a developer tab, right? So in the developer tab, you can see there is an option called as record macro, or you will have a record macro button at the bottom itself. Okay. And many of you might ask where I don't have developer tab, how to add it. So I can just say go to file. Okay, I'll go to file here. I'll go to options. Okay. So in the options, you can see there is something called as customized ribbon. And in the customized ribbon, you can see developer tab is ticked here. So for you guys, it will be unticked. You just need to tick this and you just need to say okay. So that your developer tab is instantly added to your Excel file. Okay. Now, what we need to actually do here is, mm, so when we have such kind of a data here, so for example, I have a repetitive task where I have to create a new Excel workbook each and every time. And then what I have to do, I have to copy and paste the table to that particular new workbook. Okay. So if you see here right now, doing what? I'm recording a macro in this particular new workbook here, and I'm pasting this Excel table here. Okay. This table is there in this particular file. Okay. So the first thing we need to know is, see, as we are recording a video, we need to exactly only perform the things that has to be recorded. Okay. So when I'm using a recording option, what happens is Excel will always record any click or anything that I do with my mouse or keyboard exactly as it is, and it will record it as a macro, and then that will be performed each and every time I run the macro. Okay. So in that case, first thing we'll see here is in the developer tab, um, the Mac option is here, right? So we always use a relative reference option here. If you remember, relative references are the general reference in Excel. So always we have to select a relative reference here because the macro becomes much more dynamic nature when I'm selecting a relative reference property and then I'm recording the macro here. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'll just press on the record macro button here, and then I'll just give my macro a name. Okay, so here I have to do what? I have to specify a name for the macro. So I'll just let it be macro one itself, and I can also give a shortcut for the macro. Okay, so any shortcut that I can give, for example, I'm giving Control Shift Q. So what happens here is whenever I press Control Shift Q, that particular macro will always run. Okay, and over and above that, it is asking me for the description also and where the macro should be stored. So it is fine, I'll just store it in this workbook itself. And the description here, I can write whatever the macro does, but right now it is not required. Okay. So what I'll do here is I'll just say okay now. See, now the recording has started. See, now stop recording button is being shown. The recording of the macro has been started. So see, my cursor is here. So from now on, whatever I perform on the Excel, everything will be recorded as a macro. Okay. So for example, what I'm doing, I'm selecting this table here, copying it, creating a new workbook here, okay, new Excel file, and pasting it. Okay. See, now book 2 is open, right? And after I record exactly what I want to do, what I'll do, I'll just go back to this workbook and stop recording it. Okay. So once I stop recording it, what will happen here is, see, each and every time I run this macro, for example, Control Shift Q. See, I'm just pressing now Control Shift Q. I'm not doing anything else. You can see automatically it is copying, pasting, and bringing the data in next workbook, and then it is coming back to this workbook also. You can see that, right? Because I came back. You can see book 3 is created. In the same way, if I run this again, for example, again I'm pressing Control Shift Q. See, it will create a new workbook, paste this table there, and come back here automatically. Okay. So this is how. See, now the book 4 is created. So you can see here itself how many number of Excel files are created by the macro itself. Okay. So this is how a macro works. When we are recording a macro, if we record the exact thing that we want, The macro will always perform the exact thing each and every time. So what happens in this is, first the thing is our efforts reduce. We can reduce our efforts a lot, and over and above that, when we are using macros, we can actually automate the tasks, or we can make our work easier, or we can just do what we can concentrate on other important areas here. Okay, so that is why generally a macro is used for automation purposes, and also to reduce our day to day work here. So see, such kind of things can be easily learned, where you can learn how to record a macro, so that at least even if you don't know VBA coding, see generally the macros are written in VBA code. So even if you don't know VBA coding, what you can do here is, you can always go ahead and just learn the like record the macro and then use it. Okay, any basic macro can be recorded automatically. Okay, so in that case, what happened here is, see, now we have created a macro. So if I want to create, I want to see what macros I have created, how many macros I've created. What I'll do, I'll go to the macros tab here. In the macro tab, you can see here what I'm doing here is, this there is a list of macros here, right? So this the list that is there in all the open workbooks, all the open macros that are there in the workbook which is open right now, is being displayed here, as simple as that. Okay, in the same way, I can go and enable the macro security also from here. See, macro security is nothing but, it is just like a feature. If you want to use in Excel, macros in Excel, you have to enable it just by going here. Okay, and over and above that, we need to know one more thing. See, macro files, when we save it, for example, I'm just saving this. Okay, so here itself, it is asking me what, in what file format. You can see if I'm saying save as, the basic file format of Excel is XLSX, right? But what I want to do, I want to do one particular thing, that is, I want to save it as a macro enabled workbook here. Okay, why I have to save it as a macro enabled workbook is, if I don't save it in this format, what will happen, the macros will be deleted. My file will get saved, the work will be saved, but the next time I open the file, my macro code will not be there, or the macro that I created will not be there. So the macro that you created, if it is has to be there, then what you need to do here, you need to actually save it as an XLSM workbook. Okay, so Excel macro enabled workbook is the type of file which stores macros in it. Okay, I mean, along with all the other Excel data, you can always see any XLSM file is also a normal Excel file only, but it is, in addition, it has macros also in it. Okay, as simple as that. To improve the security of the files, and see, the data that we receive from internet can be harmful, right? So improve the security, they have kept a separate extension for a macro enabled workbook. Okay, so this is how we work with macros in Excel. And if you want to see the macro code that has been written when I was recording it, you can see, you can just click on the Visual Basics here, and you can just go and see. I think in book 2, I think in book 1, right? Okay, book 1 only we have recorded the macro. Yeah, in the modules. And in the modules, you can see Excel has written this code for me. See, this code I have not written. When I was recording the macro, Excel has written this particular code for me. Okay, as simple as that. So if you guys have any doubts, you can always ask me on a live chat, or if you want to know anything, you can always ask it to me. Or what we can do here is, let me just see if I can come up with something else that I can explain you in macro. If it is not there, then what we can do, we can just go ahead and end today's session. Okay. So I want you guys to know one more thing here. So if you want the macro to be saved here in anywhere, okay. So for example, you're creating one macro which is common for all the workbooks that you're using in your office. What you can do here is, you can store the macro while creating itself. You can store the macro in my personal workbook. Okay, my personal macro workbook. When you save it in this particular Excel, this thing, what is that? Uh, Personal workbook, what will happen, the macro will be shown in all the Excel workbooks. Even though the main file is closed, the macro is stored in a central macro workbook. So from there, any Excel file you use will always be directly be able to use that macro directly. Okay, whatever you have created. So you can just save your macros in the personal macro workbook. Okay, over and above that, what you can do here is, uh, yeah, that is what you can we can actually do. Okay. So okay, thank you guys. Then what we can do here is we can just end today's session and we'll meet tomorrow. Thank you guys. Bye. See you tomorrow.